To the drosha now. Okay. Already yesterday evening, you heard me speak about the importance of animals, or this donkey, and what it really meant. And I'm going to recap very, very briefly for this morning. There were three different versions of why in our Torah there is a talking donkey and what that message really holds for us. So the Rambam thought, okay, it's maybe just a dream. It never really happened. The whole thing was in the mind. He didn't want to accept an animal talking. We know it wasn't a dream, because how could we have inherited this beautiful, how goodly are your tents, and have that come down through that? And it couldn't have been a dream. Well, we didn't think so. And the other thought was maybe it was a miracle. Hashem just made a miracle and it will never happen again. That didn't appeal to me either. And what did appeal to me, before we go on to another completely different message, is what Rabbi Luzzatto, the 19th century in Italy, said. He said, animals do speak. I know Serona, Marion, all of us here, we love animals. And I know my animals, I understand their different voices. And he said, when the donkey brays, you can hear the difference. And really, this man who'd been with this donkey his whole life had got used to understanding that braying, what it meant. And he knew he was in pain. And that's the explanation I like. What are the other main messages, apart from being kind to people also who have difficulties in expressing themselves? Maybe because of self-doubt, maybe because of just fear of saying the wrong thing. That's another analogy we can make, as that donkey spoke in a different way. Now, however, there's another great message that has come out of this. And I must tell you that my source today is all different streams of Judaism and what their rabbis have to say, be it Aish, I love what their rabbi, and I'm quoting as well from there, be it our own wonderful progressive movement. And I'll share with you what, he's not a rabbi, but Josh has to say of Artzenu, which is a Zionist organization in America. So, but here is something that caught my eye. What is another message that we can see if we look at Bilam's behavior? And he was a prophet. He spoke to Hashem. He wasn't Jewish. I like that, because it means that all humanity can hear Hashem's name. And if you're a prophet, which means that you listen and you hear very clearly, what was the difference between, let's say, one of our greatest prophets, Abraham, and Bilam or Balaam? Now, who's ever studied as a student of Abraham, there were three particular traits which was terribly important. And there were three other traits amongst the students of Bilam, because Bilam as a prophet and Abraham both had their students. And it says here from Pirkei Avot 5:22, the Talmud, whoever has three particular traits is counted among the students of Abraham, and whoever has three other traits may be counted among the students of Bilam. He who has a good eye, humility, and contentedness is a student of Abraham. But how can we discern the students, the followers of Bilam? One who has an evil eye, one who is arrogant, and one who is greedy is a student or a follower of Bilam. Why does the Pirkei Avot tell us that? Well, look at Bilam. He agreed because he couldn't resist the price they offered him to curse. His intention was to curse. He was not a good man, but God made other words come out. But in spite of that, he still, basically, he was forced to say those words, but they weren't in his heart, in his subconscious mind. In this week's parasha, the Jewish people, as we heard, passed through the territory of Moab. Balak, you've heard about it, wants to wage war, etc., and hires Bilam. Who was Bilam? And what distinguishes him from a man, let's say like Abraham, both prophets, who uses his powers for the betterment of mankind? The Talmud identifies 3 key traits. Let's look at the good eye versus the evil eye. Someone who has a good eye, we're not talking about those who can see very clearly or you need glasses. We're talking about the way you look at life, the way you look at humanity, the way you look at people around you, the way you look even at someone who is hurting you. Someone who has a good eye will sincerely celebrate the success of others. Very interesting. While someone with an evil eye always begrudges the success of others. And I'm afraid you and I have seen a lot of examples of that. In Genesis 18:2, Abraham rushes to care for 3 nomadic strangers. You know, in those days, they wandered through the desert. And we know it was part of his constant striving to be closer to Hashem. He had this goodness born in him. He wanted to welcome the strangers. Contrast this with Bilam, a hitman. He was a hitman, hired to generate a bad future for the Jewish people. Maybe not with a gun, but with the power of a seer or someone doing a curse on you. So Bilam could have just as easily prayed for victory by blessing Moab. He could have rather prayed that Moab and his people succeed in the war against the Israelites. He didn't. Instead, he didn't influence Balak at all. He chose the low road of cursing the Jews. Sure, both sides of an army want to win. Then pray for their success. Why pray for our cursing the Jews and defeat? You can discover whether people have a good eye or an evil eye by seeing their reaction to another good person's news or another good news, for example, etc., etc. So, you know, if you drive up, they say in a shiny new car, there'll be a chorus of Mazel Tov, wow. And the person who resents your success say, it's quite a nice model. What, you know, when did you get it? Okay, you get the message. So, all right. I was listening yesterday afternoon to a lovely parasha by a rabbi. He's a modern Orthodox rabbi in Israel under this lockdown university. I don't know, have you heard of it, Serena? Lockdown university. It's free, you can listen. And I thought, let me listen. I love to listen to what other modern everyday streams of Judaism say, including our own. And he was telling them, you know, the Jews are really a unique people. His son had a child, so he just became a grandfather. And when he went into the hospital, Hadassah, there were people had given birth there. And it was all the different nations, all the different people that live in Israel today. And everyone shouted as he came in, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. The whole ward shouted Mazel Tov. The other guests shouted Mazel Tov. That is unique. And I'm not sure that might happen here. But he said, what a unique people we are, that we have joy in another simcha, in another blessing. But he also said something which fascinated me, which I'd like to share with you. And when he explained, he does it at 3:30 in the afternoon, so it's before Shabbat. So anyone wants to listen, they can. I do. It goes throughout the world. And he explained something which fascinated me. In the blessing, how goodly are your tents, O Israel. What does the tents refer to? It refers to the home. The tents were the homes of the Israelites in the desert. It wasn't the synagogue. It wasn't the Mishkan. God puts the words in his mouth, this rabbi said, and I like that how goodly are your homes, O Israel. And from this lovely rabbi concluded that the greatest way of ensuring the future of the Jewish people is first in the home and second in the synagogue, in the Mishkan where we are now. Now that is interesting, and it's true. Unless in the home, as you are doing, Brian, with Andili, you teach the next generation. After that, the mitzvah comes of our coming to every Shabbat service. Yes, but he said the home. How goodly are your tents, how goodly are your homes, O Israel. And then how wonderful the Mishkan and how wonderful the synagogue. So I thought that's so important. All right, so the second attribute of Abraham as opposed to Bilam is humility versus arrogance. You saw how he spoke to his donkey, but that's how he'd speak to people as well. He thought he was great. So this humility is something that we, the Jews, hear over and over again. It was Moses' greatest asset. He never saw himself more powerful than anyone else. He saw himself merely relaying Hashem's message, but equal to the people. So Abraham also personified humility, because his mission in life was to teach that all power derives directly from God. What do we really mean by that? It means that when we listen to the voice inside us, no matter, Lou, how late in life, and no matter how many sins of the past, when we start to listen, we all know what's the right thing to do. I don't have to tell you. So just listen to that voice. And basically, that's what Abraham stood for, but not Bilam. And the other thing is a very important one we've often forgotten about is contentedness. Be happy with what you have. Each one of us in this room, in this beautiful synagogue today, and in your rooms on Zoom at home, we've got so much more than so much sadness about us. We've got a roof over our heads. We've got food. Why look at someone who has 10 times more and say, I wish I could be them? No, that means that you will not realize the best for yourself. So contentedness versus greed. When Abraham journeyed to the land of Israel, a metaphor for a personal spiritual journey, he was willing to give up all the luxuries in exchange for values and principles to find this new way of living that had come to him. This idea that there's only one God and one humanity. And we're all brothers and sisters. It has nothing whatsoever to do with our religion, the color of our skin, whether we are wealthy or poor. We are all one humanity with one God. And that's basically what contentedness means. It means, first of all, to want to be more than you are now, but happy with the potential God has given you. And that is really the main difference. Bilam, you could see, was greedy. He wasn't satisfied with anything. He did his best to curse, which he didn't manage to do because God took control of it. Or the better voice inside him got out. But even as he left at the end to run away, he still, in a funny way, one of his prayers said, you're a people that stands alone. And let me conclude in that. Perhaps Bilam did not mean that nicely. We're a people that other people want to kill. We're a people that other people reject. Not true. And unfortunately, that type of thinking has got into the mentality of many Jewish people, ourselves in Israel, that we see this word, and I read it in one of the prayers, that you are a people that stand alone. It's how we interpret that alone. It doesn't mean that the world is against us. That's what Bilam meant. But that's not what God meant in that word. We can never be alone because we have this permanent source of values and principles and decency from Hashem and the voice inside. But we can also create that aloneness. And let me conclude on that and just mention, as we really are short of time, that two people, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, who is I regard as a main mentor, and Josh Weinberg, a wonderful young Jew, I think Jacob is 50 young. I think Josh is about 50, yes, it's still young. And they basically say the same thing, that when Bilam said in one of his so-called prayers, oh, you're a people that walk alone, he meant it that people don't like us, that anti-Semitism is something that can never be changed. In other words, even in the blessing, Bilam was thinking of a curse. And yet, both Rabbi Sachs and Josh Weinberg have said, no, we mustn't get this in our head that the whole world is against us. They are not. And he said, because of this complex almost, and all our years of persecution and suffering, we are not in an era where the whole world hates us. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs makes a plea in a beautiful drosha. I can let you have the title of it if you'd like. And he says, please understand that you're not alone. Hashem is always with you, yes, but so are most of the decent people of the world. And that we can see today in the Abraham Accords as people come together. And Josh Weinberg said a very funny thing, I'll conclude in this. He said, we're always saying as a Jewish people, do you love me? The way they said it in Rich Man, Poor Man. And Israel is saying, do you love me? And he concluded with the fact, and please read it, Jacob has included it in our newsletter under, I don't know if it's Reform Judaism or Artsur. And he said, Israel said to Biden now, and they bring in politics, because if we don't relate our religion to the rest of the world and what's happening around us, we failed. And he says, Israel said to Biden, do you love me? When Biden came, and Biden said yes. And Israel said, shoo. Okay, so we know even between love in a family, or between love in a husband and wife, or father, mother and children, there are always moments of tension and argument. But yes, thank you, Hashem, for giving us the state of Israel. We're living in an incredible era. And thank you, Hashem, for the good people of the earth that love us, and for the people that we can love and help, both in our synagogue and in the world, find their true humanity. Shabbat Shalom.